Three, two, one, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast from three Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. This is season 3, episode 6, and today we are going to give much love to one of the favorite series near and dear to our heart, Rebels. We have talked about the series often throughout the podcast, but never actually dedicated an episode to our beautiful, beautiful family of the Ghost. So we will be talking about that in overview. But before we get to the actual series, we would like to talk to you about a really, really good cause that we're supporting called the Amidala Initiative. So Goose, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you. I'd love to, right? We are part of the Amidala Initiative, which is an initiative that just started this week, actually, but it was prompted from some really troubling things that have been occurring in the country lately. As many know or may not know, and if you don't, you're going to find out right now. We're a particularly liberal group of people, and we advocate for rights of marginalized groups and people that aren't well represented. And as part of that, we were kind of appalled when we've seen some of the things that have been happening in the country, specifically with some of the attacks that some government officials have been doing against transsexual youths in the States, going trying to take away their rights to affirm their gender identities and whatnot. But particularly troubling still, it's not that these representatives and government officials are talking about is that they're actually enacting some of these things into action. And specifically in Texas last week, February 22nd, the governor, Greg Abbott, actually did an initiative or signed some legislation. Not sure what the technical term for it is exactly, but it basically authorized the federal body, the state bodies in Texas to be able to go after parents of trans youths that are helping their children go through their gender affirming processes, right, that they have to go through in the name of protecting children from child abuse, which is ironic, right? You're saying that we're protecting the children, but what we're doing is harming them, harming families, tearing them apart. It's a pretty horrible thing for these children that, like, in the past have no recourse, and now in a world where things have been more open and accepting, to kind of have this outward attack to them is kind of horrifying. So a lot of groups in the fandom that have been very proactive and supportive of such causes have banded together. 77 of us have banded together to create this Amidala Initiative, which is basically a fundraiser. I mean, it's not it's a little grain of salt, a grain of sand that from our part, to try to help this worthy cause and do this fundraiser to help come up with $25,000 to donate to Equality Texas, which is a group in Texas, obviously, that helps with these type of topics and with these children and families that are going through this. So it's very important. We're trying to do more. Obviously, the movement just started. Right now, we only have the GoFundMe started to, do that specific fundraiser. But other things are gonna be happening through it as it develops and the fandom comes together in a more cohesive way. There's gonna be a lot of art, a lot of things that the fandom will start creating to help support Equality Texas and trans youths, not just in Texas, but in the whole country. So it's very important. It's a cause that's very near and dear to us and our friends in the community as well. So we hope that anyone that's listening supports the cause. If you're willing and able, please be able to donate. We'll be leaving a description link down in the description below so that you can access that link and donate whatever you can. If you're willing and able, of course. If you can't donate, please help amplify this. Every little bit helps. So money's not the only way you can help. You can help spread the word across by sharing, retweeting, talking with your families, reposting on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, to get the word out to help these children. So obviously you can go to the website so you can read more about it once we leave that in the description. But for now, I mean, that's it. It's kind of a sad situation that these children are going through that they should not be going through, because they deserve a little love and support that we can give them. But yeah, that's the unfortunate reality of some corners of the country we live in. So yeah, so between this and Ukraine and everything, it's kind of a tough time for the world. So trying to, as a positive fandom, come together and do our little bit into it. So hopefully that explains things a little bit.
Absolutely. And for anyone that has doubts, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatry Association, the Pediatricians Association, they've all condemned these types of laws. And it's actually beneficial to have gender affirming therapies, and to be labeled as criminals to the parents that are doing the best for the children.
Horrible.
It's a horrible and demeaning. It's, you know what, to all the parents out there, keep up strong and do what's best for your children. And to everybody out there, let's help as much as we can.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. It's difficult because we'd wanna do more, but for now this is the most we can do. But obviously, like I said, more will come, and as we said before, we support all of these causes and we support all these families, and even more than the family, the children, because we're not really protecting children if we're denying what makes them who they are. And I don't know, it's terrible to see a lot of these people impose their will on people who are just trying to be who they are. So please,
Just
whatever way you can. Yeah.
The irony comes from the party that claims, oh, we are all about freedom and doing what, like, we don't want government to tell us what to do. But then it's like, you're telling everybody, you're telling women they can't have abortions, you're telling parents and people that are different than the hetero cis normative that they can be like, what?
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous. It's a lot ridiculous, actually. But okay, this is a downer right now. So just support the cause, more positivity out there, and I think let's just talk about Rebels, because now I'm all sad.
Rebels is a good way to like have this conversation, because what better way to kind of talk about people that are going after families than with a show that is all about family and inclusion and love and positivity and all those beautiful things that Rebels turned out to be. So it's kind of a perfect way to kind of seg into Rebels. But Rebels is interesting, right? Because it's the sequel show that went right after Clone Wars, right after the acquisition of Lucasfilm by Disney. So once the first trailers came out, it was quite a different tone in terms of like animation, in terms of like aspect ratios, scope, all of the, like, it was completely different show from the first trailers that came out versus what Clone Wars had been up until then. So I think a lot of fans might have been apprehensive. I know I was. The show was shifted from being premiered in Cartoon Network like Clone Wars was to go into the Disney Channel, which automatically kind of makes it seem, oh, is this
more about kids? Yeah,
it's more like a younger, or I mean, it's an animated show, so it's usually aimed at children, but it's like for younger children than Clone Wars was, because Clone Wars tended to be, especially like the further it got right along the season, a little darker for like dark, for older teenagers, right? Because it's still a young children's show, so for teenagers. But Rebels definitely seemed like it's skewed to like an even younger demographic. So I'm sure that some people were a little apprehensive about that. But as the seasons went by, I think that there was a lot of transformation for Rebels, and it became a show that was very unique, and it set itself apart from Clone Wars. But before we get like into all of that, why don't we like go into what everyone thought about Rebels going into it, especially under that perspective, right? Of the not sequel to Clone Wars, but as the show directly following Clone Wars. Nani, I know you only watched Clone Wars recently. remind everybody that's watching. What was the order in which you watched things? Did you watch Clone Wars first and then Rebels? Did you watch Rebels first and then Clone Wars? And what was that experience of like that, dichotomy of both shows?
Yeah. So I was very apprehensive to watch the animated shows, period, full stop, because the first one that came out obviously was Clone Wars. And that was, to me, it was more announced, like there was a lot more commercials about it because there was like that theatrical view, and because it was going to be the story of the continuation of like Anakin and Obi-Wan and actually doing the Clone Wars. So I feel like it got way more promotion when it first came out, and I just didn't like the animation style. I didn't like it, so I was like, I don't need to watch this, whatever. So I just skipped it completely, and then they started announcing Rebels, which I don't think got as much promotion as it did, and it kind of seemed like if you didn't watch Clone Wars, maybe, it wasn't necessary to watch Rebels either. And I also thought this one looks really, really kiddie too. So I just completely ignored both of them. So I didn't actually start watching the Clone Wars until we did the podcast, which I made the promise. First of all, it's Bando, who's been getting me to watch everything for years now. My brother, who's been trying to do the same. Both of you who've been trying to do it before the podcast. And then I promised to do it once we started. And I have to admit that I struggled at first to get into the Clone Wars, because especially that first season was so disjointed that it was kind of hard to really get into it. Obviously, the more you get into it, the more amazing it becomes. So by the end of it, by season 4, I loved it. So as soon as I finished season 4, I went into Rebels. I didn't have the problem getting into it with Rebels. In like a day, I was already through the first season entirely and half the second season. I loved Rebels right away. I actually enjoyed the animation more for some reason. Like that it was colorful, that I thought it flowed a little bit better, because I'm not really a fan of that kind of blocky, more 3D animation style of Clone Wars. So I really enjoyed it. I love that it was a full story, that you don't have like 3 episodes cut to some other story, and sometimes you're left wanting more in the arcs. So this was just an entire sequence. So you got really, really invested in the characters. I love that mostly it was characters that we didn't know. We were just introduced to them here and we fell in love immediately with them. And one of the things that we always talk about as one of the greatest things about Star Wars is found family. And I think the best example of found family really is in Rebels, because you see how this family is really forged, how they keep adding new members, how they endure all these hardships. And it's incredible. It's one of the first times that you see a lot more importance brought to non-human characters as well. So you get a lot more diversity and growth in different kinds of characters. There's more non-humans that are sensitive to the Force. And I don't know, I thought it was really, really great world building and character development, and you really, really become attached. And then it is also very, very good. I think it's been the best one from other shows that have been produced before and since Rebels, is that even though you still get amazing cameos, because we get Darth Maul, we get Darth Vader, we get a whole slew of characters, but they never take the focus away from the family of the ghosts. Like the family of the ghosts is always the focus on the show, and when you bring in these cameo characters, it's always to further the story
in service. Yeah.
So there's a lot that I love about Rebels, but that's just an overview.
Mo, what about you? Because I think you saw it more or less concurrently when it came out, and I think when we went to Celebration, we saw the first 2 episodes of what was it, season 3 or season 4? They premiered there in Orlando, which was a great time to be able to see like those episodes before the season premiere.
Oh, actually, I hadn't seen Rebels at all.
Oh, interesting.
Before
when it showed up in Celebration.
Yeah, like to me, my intro to Rebels was looking at this awesome cosplayers. So I was like, who the hell are these people? Because they look awesome. I think I remember asking Goose like, who are they? And you were like, oh, they're from Rebels. And then we went to the Rebels panel, and we saw the first 2 episodes of I think it was season 4.
I think
it might have been the
4.
last. And I was like, damn, I have to watch this.
Like, what is this? This is awesome.
So actually, my first Celebration, I hadn't watched any like Rebels or Clone Wars. So I was like, okay, now I have to catch up with everything that I've missed. But I think along with what Nanny said, like Rebels is probably like I think probably one of my favorite stories, Star Wars stories out there.
Mhm.
Uh, the fact that like there's no main character per se. The whole family is the main character. Everybody gets developed in their own
Mhm.
certain ways. We see characters from outside uh developing and like changing throughout the season. I've loved like we get like double agents, we get like people transitioning from the Empire to the Rebel cause and vice versa. We have like a plethora of like deep and meaningful experiences that we've missed throughout Star Wars, either because it's a movie and you can't show it, or you had Clone Wars, which were like what Nani is saying, like independent, like arcs. Let's
Mhm.
deal with one thing and that's it. Like there's no continuity or repercussion, and the fact
Mhm.
that Rebels took us from the beginning of this family all the way to like its well, I guess next step in evolution. Like their disparagement, like the end of the Fellowship, if you can
Mhm. Mhm.
sort of say that that's the end of Rebels. But it's so beautiful the way that I think it deepens like the lore of like what the Force is,
So
what the
much.
Force entails, what like, and it's so natural, so in tune with what Star Wars is,
Mhm.
that I think that's what transcends. And I don't know, I've yet to meet anybody that has some hatred. I'm sure there's somebody out there
Somebody
that,
has to hate it, of
Uh,
course. Yeah.
Yes,
but
of
but I
course.
think it might be the least like there's just like people that haven't watched it, and then everybody that's seen it probably is like, yeah, at least they liked it. Like I haven't seen
Mhm.
anybody that hates it, so
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
I mean, and it's such
Yeah.
a cool perspective because it's the rebellion before it's even the rebellion. It's just a group of
Mhm.
rebels and they're kind of trying to form the rebellion. So they're kind of just these little grain of sand in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of
Mhm.
things. And usually we've been so focused on just like grand central of the rebellion, like the main characters, main actors, when the rebellion wouldn't survive without these little like fringe operations
Mhm.
that were
Mhm.
happening in the background. And to see it from their perspective really makes you
Right.
see how big the rebellion and everything really was. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's the most powerful thing about the show is how it's able to organically grow into like this. I wouldn't call it a behemoth because it's not a behemoth. A behemoth implies that it's unwieldy, and Rebels is anything but. Rebels is large, but in a comforting kind of way, if that makes any sense. Because first season, right? It starts very very small and intimate. It's all about Ezra, and he's alone in Lothal and everything. So it has a different framing, right, from all of the other stories that we've seen. I mean, it's not in terms when you compare it to Luke Skywalker's journey, but when you
Mhm.
compare it to like Clone Wars, for example, or Clone Wars, you were saying that Rebels doesn't have a main protagonist, and the main protagonist is really the family. In Clone Wars, it's kind of the same thing. There's really no main protagonist. It's the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is the main protagonist
Mhm.
of the show, and everyone's interactions with that war and what happens to them while they're in it. But the war is the driver. Afterwards, Dave Filoni made Ahsoka the protagonist of the show, but that's a separate conversation. But in Rebels, exactly, it's like it's not the action that's driving the show or the characters; it's the characters that are driving like all the story beats of everything that's happening. From Ezra wanting to, the Luke Skywalker character who wants to do something larger than himself and find his parents, to Kanan, who's afraid of his legacy and who's afraid to be more than just a space cowboy when he could be a space cowboy Jedi. Hera going insane, being a mom to like all these crazy kids while also trying to be a general. Sabine
And a badass
also
at the same
fighting
time.
and a badass at the same time. Sabine fighting against the legacy of Mandalore and the guilt of her actions with the Empire. Zeb being the last of his kind. It's like all these very deep character driven moments that propel the story forward and make it grow in a way that's just beautiful and endearing. And I have to admit that when I came into the show, I was not like, I wouldn't say I was against it. I'm always open to Star Wars. I was gonna sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna enjoy it because more Star Wars is always good, even if it's not your cup of tea or not my cup of tea. It's if you guys that want to hate Star Wars, that's on you. I want to at least try to enjoy it. But when I started watching Rebels, like it's the scope of it seemed like more like a smaller world compared to Clone Wars, which obviously it's a it's a decision that they made so that it seemed like a barren world because the oppression of the Empire. But for me, it just didn't like jive with what I was expecting. I didn't like the spaghetti animation of the characters. They were like too like I wasn't a fan of it. It just seemed too cartoonish, if that makes sense. Even though Clone Wars still a cartoon as well, but that felt a little more. I don't know. There was more grittiness, I feel, to the Clone Wars and Rebels had. A little too polished and too colorful. But I kind of had a Last Jedi moment where in the Last Jedi, I also wasn't jiving with it. Like the more I got into the lore and started understanding everything, and everything started like unraveling. It's like, oh, there's really a lot here to enjoy. And it's just like I had like that moment that you had, Nani, with Clone Wars, where I just let the animation, forget the animation.
Yeah.
Look at
focus on the story. Yeah.
Yeah. And the moment that happened, like the beautiful world of Rebels just blossomed.
There's so many good stories.
And that's the point. It just kept blossoming, right? Like it just kept growing and growing on top of it, everything is built on top of everything. So for me, it was like a beautiful, beautiful experience of just growing with the Ghost family, but then seeing like how their journeys just like you said, naturally and organically took them to see like these legacy characters and cameos that didn't feel forced, like in season 2 of The Mandalorian. It just feels like they were part of the story.
Exactly.
It's just like from Lando to Leia to Papa Palpatine at the end, which I thought was amazing. And we'll get to that in a future episode. But it was beautiful. I loved it. It's great. I do have to do a rewatch, especially now that we're approaching Rebels Remembered, which is March 5th, by the way, guys. Don't forget to use the hashtag Rebels Remembered. But yeah, I mean, Rebels is wonderful. It made me even buy the art of Star Wars Rebels because it's something to really, really appreciate, because there's a lot there that's not just beautiful in terms of like lore development and like growing what the Force is, but also just what's a family? Like, how do we get along? How do we deal with each other? And the next step, I think, is having even more diversity. I hear a lot of people always on the internet saying it's never going to be enough how much diversity there is. And you know what? I agree. It's not going to be enough because we can always do better. We can always strive to do better representation.
More is always better.
And more is always better. So yes, it'll never be enough. More representation and more diversity. It's always a good thing. And I don't want to have enough of it. I want more. So yeah, suck it. And Rebels rocks.
Rebels does rock. It's like, but I think I love the whole pacing of it because, like you said, Goose, like it starts with seeing the effects of the Empire on a local, planet that we've never heard. I mean, let me rephrase it. I've never heard before. because I'm sure someone's gonna say like, oh, it was like someone in some book out there or some comic we saw local before. It's like, okay, fine. I've never heard of it, and I'm sure most fans haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
But to see like the transition of like, the local government changing over to the Empire, and like I love like those little things of like, make the changes. Like you will see like the Palpatine on the background, like just looming, and like now it feels like a dictatorship and like an empire will feel like. And you see like some people are okay with it, they're still doing their own business. To most people, they live as long as they're not killing them, like they'll just keep living in.
Right.
But then you see like the rise of the rebellion. You see like but then there's also the moral ambiguity, because on the rebellion side, I think like it was like wasn't like the governor also like, oh, some people didn't love the governor. It was like they were against him, like, but like how you set aside your differences to deal with a larger threat to that diversity, to that democracy, because to that way of life that the empire was trying to impose, which was none. It was just like the monolith, like everybody lives this way, and this your life is dictated. So we've seen that transition, like how it affects like the locals. I think that's what the world building is like really neat in this sense. Like we're seeing like why when A New Hope comes, the empire is so bad. You're seeing the roots of this coming in. So
yeah, and you
Yeah,
can
it's
tell that at first it's really subtle because, like you were saying, it's the end of the war, so there's peace, so we're fine with it. And then they start like bringing in the change in currency and making people register themselves, and you can see just these little things that people would just take for granted as they fully acquire power in all these different systems, to the point that it becomes oppressive without people really realizing that it was happening. So it was really subtle and really well done, I think. So and seeing it through that perspective of focusing mainly on the one planet Lothal, and then going into other places as they become more a part of the rebellion, but then ending it all coming full circle and ending again on Lothal. So you don't ever lose the continuity of the story, and you see its progression and how important it becomes, because it's Ezra's homeworld. So even though it's just one cog in the wheel that is the Empire. So, and it's nice that the focus wasn't Tatooine,
Yeah.
So
Finally.
that's always nice.
Yes. Even though we're going back May 25th, we're
always
going back to
Tatooine.
Tatooine.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, we're going to talk about Rebels, but now that you said that, I have to say it's funny. Episode 7 is just like, why does everyone always want to go back to Jakku? And he's like, no, why does everyone want to go back to Tatooine? That's the question. But anyway, whatever. We say that in jest.
That is the question.
But yeah, no, I totally agree. And especially one of the things that I really like about that is like it's a twofold type of thing. It's like how it masterfully, bridges, no pun intended with Ezra Bridger, the transition of like that Clone Wars aesthetic from the Clone Wars and Attack of the Clones and like the prequel films to the Imperial aesthetic of the original trilogy. And it's really cool like how they inhabit like both worlds at the same time, because we really are in that in-between space between like the peace provided by the Imperial machine post Clone Wars, and then like that Imperial regime of the original trilogy, and kind of see like all those little pieces of going back to Geonosis, and then see Saw Gerrera and post Clone Wars, but in Geonosis after the war. And then obviously see Captain Rex in like in the all-terrain vehicle that they used to use in the Clone Wars, and they're fantastic. They put on a couple pounds. So the the Clone Trooper armor doesn't fit them anymore. But to kind of see like we still love them, and it's still kick ass. So that's all that matters. But to kind of see like those two worlds kind of coexisting, it's such a beautiful thing that I don't think Star Wars had given us yet, because each world kind of lived independently, right? It was like the original trilogy for everyone that loved the original trilogy, because at that point, everyone still hated the prequel trilogy. Then the prequel babies that loved the prequel trilogy only lived in the prequel trilogy stuff. So Rebels kind of like brought both of those things together. It was like a beautiful handshake between two old friends that needed to meet each other, which finally happened in live action, I think, right? With the episode of The Mandalorian when Mando gets the Naboo Starfighter. That's also one of those moments. It's like, okay, original trilogy and prequels, we can coexist. We can coexist.
We love you now.
Yes, it's all family. It's all family. So
Beggars Canyon Run, so many good soundtracks. Fantastic.
Oh yeah. But one thing I will always be thankful for Rebels is that it brought back, my boy in blue. Grand Admiral Thrawn was brought back into canon. So I always have to be thankful for that show, just for that fact alone. That Grand Admiral Thrawn was resurrected from the expanded universe and thrust back upon us onto the canon and brought back in like a beautiful, masterful way. Because I was kind of like worried. I'm like, wait, but Admiral Thrawn is like a post-original trilogy villain. Like, I want to see him in that capacity. Like, how is he really going to work here? But every time I doubt something that Lucasfilm and Dave Filoni are doing, I just have to shut up and just let it happen, and you'll see and you'll like it. And effectively, like Thrawn was perfect villain for this show, and left his ending perfectly ambiguous for all the things that are coming up now with Ahsoka and the Mandalorian. So I always gotta good for my boy in blue. Every time like a show puts him in there, I'm like, this show is a 10 out of 10 for me. How did you guys feel about Grand Admiral Thrawn? Because
I haven't read.
How familiar were you guys with the character?
I haven't read any of the books, honestly. I've really been meaning to, but just from you, who's kind of commenting ad nauseum about Thrawn and how much you love Thrawn, this character, I kind of had, a general idea of what this character is supposed to be. So I can't really compare, people's perspectives that have actually read the books and even the original ones before that. But I thought he was a joy to watch on the show. It's so cool to see a character who's just like super calm, super mildly spoken. There's nothing outwardly threatening about him except his ruthlessness and intelligence. But ruthlessness, not to be cruel, just calculating, reasonable, just every sentence he uttered, no word was in excess.
Wasted, yep.
It was so fun to just watch him be ahead of everybody. And every time somebody says it's like, yeah, we tricked you, I was counting on like 10 different versions of this. You didn't get me. It's so good to try to watch him being outsmarted and never is, basically. He's been one of my favorite villains to see. And especially because you kind of agree with him a lot of times. Like, you can understand the reason why he's acting this way. It's not necessarily because he's okay with oppression or whatever. He's just trying to save his own people. So there's something very empathetic about him, even though he's supposed to be a villain, because you're the hero of your own story. So if we see it from his perspective, he's doing what he thinks is right for his people, and he's never outwardly cruel or anything. So I thought he was a really, really interesting character.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that, though, because Thrawn doesn't see himself as a hero either. He just sees himself as someone that just does what needs to be done to do the necessary thing. So if that makes him a villain, then he will accept that role, but it's because he thinks he's doing what is right. And I think that's the interesting thing about Thrawn, especially moving forward to the live action Thrawn, is if we're going to keep, because obviously in the show, you kind of need, it's a children's show, quote unquote. So you kind of need to have that distinction. Good guys, bad guys. But I mean, obviously Rebels had a lot of shades of gray, but you kind of have to have that distinction so you know who you're fighting against. But in terms of like how Thrawn is characterized that way, and especially how you were describing Nani with the books, I would really love to see like how he's developed in live action, because I don't think that they're going to go full villain. And obviously I don't want to make this a Thrawn show. We'll have a Thrawn show eventually, but we can't talk about Rose without Thrawn. But see him become like either an anti-villain or a hero or some in a more positive light once Ahsoka comes by.
I mean, as long as they don't over-exaggerate the character, because I think one of the best things about him is that he's all about efficiency, doing things in the best possible way with the least possible amount of steps so that you can just kill it. So as long as they keep that and not try to make it, because I feel like sometimes when they do live action, because you have all these special effects and all these things, they kind of tend to exaggerate the characters and try to make them more bombastic, just so they're more, I don't know, visually enjoyable or better to talk about, because people are more like get more attached to them if like there's more things blowing up behind them, I guess it's a good term. But these subtle characters, I feel like are better if you just keep them that way. They shine more in their subtleness. And I really hope that they kind of stick to that, because so far, as I have said ad nauseum, I haven't been impressed so far with the live action interpretation of Ahsoka.
Mhm.
So I hope that in her own show, it's going to be a little bit different, and whatever characters we get in her show are going to be treated with the respect that they deserve, and with the background that we've come to expect, and their history, and kind of the state of mind that they were in these shows, because we saw a lot of character growth. And I feel like in some of the animated stuff we've seen so far, we've kind of seen these characters go backwards in their growth. So I don't know. I guess we'll wait and see. I mean,
Mo,
we're gonna
how
watch
about
them
you?
anyway, but
How did you feel, Mo, about Thrawn? But now that Nanny mentioned it, after you saw Thrawn, how did you feel about Ahsoka and like how she was characterized in this post Clone Wars world? So double question. Let's start with Thrawn.
Double whammy. I'm always a sucker for good, like written out villains. I think a story, especially if you have an antagonist, your story is going to be as good as that antagonist. If the antagonist is not well written, it's not going to work. And I just as like Nani said, like that extremely like calculating, then like calmness that comes from like Thrawn, all the like just it almost like to him it's a game. He's just playing this game of like, you know, we're born within this certain circumstances, so I'm gonna play my game, and this the game I'm playing, and I'm gonna be the best at it.
he's playing chess on like 3 different levels.
Exactly.
Right. He's like fourth dimensional chess.
Fourth dimensional chess.
Yeah.
Everyone's playing checkers, and he's just he's playing chess in Interstellar inside the Tesseract.
But to
Speaking
me,
of which, the world between worlds is the Tesseract from Interstellar. No one can change my mind, but we'll talk about that in another episode. Sorry, keep going.
it's like to be continued, that the conversation.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But I was going back to it, like to me the scene that I remember most like is the part where I think it's when he's like talking with Hera about the trinket, the family trinket.
The Cali.
Oh yeah.
And you know, you see all around his office and like all the different like trinkets and artifacts from different like cultures, different planets, and like his explanation of like, well, I'm interested in learning about them. Like it's all about learning about your enemy and knowing them. It's like very, I'm sure there's like a lot of inspiration from like the Art of War. It's almost like you're seeing that interpretation of like, you know, Sun Tzu idea of like the best, like how a good leader should work and like apply it into Star Wars. And I think that's what Thrawn is ultimately. Like, you know, at the end of the day, Thrawn will take the decisions that are most efficient, like you were saying, Nani, but that on his worldview, you know, are what's right. And damn everything else. Like and it's a respectable villain and antagonist. No, not even a villain, you know, just an antagonist to the series. And then the portrayal of like Ahsoka, you know, we see Ahsoka like, I think we see like almost like 2 stages of Ahsoka, and I think it's defined by, you know, before Ahsoka's encounter with Darth Vader or Anakin, and after that encounter. I think the Ahsoka we see, it's at first it's the very like, you know what, I'm applying everything I learned from my days at the Jedi Academy and Jedi Order. I'm a badass. I can take care of myself. If I need to help somebody, I'll be there. But there seems to be and Ahsoka that's like looking for meaning.
Mhm.
Think, you know, once Ahsoka left the Order, like we see a little bit of that as like that transition now when season 7 of Clone Wars came. That we see like, you know, the Ahsoka that's like, okay, what I'm gonna do now. Well, so we see like that, like, well, it's almost like, you know, we see Ahsoka the Gray. We see like it's almost like getting into like, hey, what do I have to take off and what do I keep, and going through those steps. And then the Ahsoka we see at the end, the one that's, you know, faced, you know, probably the one person, you know, that she could only claim to be family, or like, well, I don't even remember how old Ahsoka was when they got kidnapped by the Jedi Order, but I'm sure it wasn't that old. So
a baby, she was a baby.
So and she meets Anakin fairly young, like
Yes.
So to see like how like to see like the realization, because I think she knew before that Anakin was Darth Vader, but in her heart she couldn't accept it.
Right.
But it's the realization that, you know, the one you once called like your North Star all of a sudden fell, like, and it's heartbreaking, like, to her, and like I'm sure it's a turning point, and that's when, you know, after that she goes through the world between worlds and probably gets enlightened and comes back as Ahsoka the White, all like with the staff and like glorious outfit. So I hope we see that Ahsoka.
Yeah, I wish we could have seen that in her live action version. You know, white staff.
Well, I think that the live action Ahsoka we've seen so far is before
this happens.
Ahsoka from the end of Rebels. That's why she's still in gray. That's why she still has the lightsabers. Because my theory going now is that once she becomes Ahsoka the White, she will let go of the lightsabers, and her weapon is her staff. She doesn't have lightsabers anymore. But that's just a theory. And it's not about Rebels.
Or we get to see a staff saber.
Or a staff saber, like Rey should have had. But I digress. Manny, what did you think about Ahsoka before we move into like? Because these are all legacy characters that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And we need to go back and talk about the main family of Rebels. But before we go into them, why don't you talk about like how you felt about Ahsoka and Rebels?
Yeah, no, it was a transition that I really enjoyed. I mean, when I first started, I didn't know that she was going to be in the show at all, because she doesn't show up till later on. And, you know, you only hear about Fulcrum. You don't really know it's her. And then when she finally shows up, it's like, oh, wait, that's cool. So, you know, she goes full spy mode. She tries to figure out where she fits in all this after losing her main mentor. And like what Mo was saying, it's especially when these moments of recognition that she kind of starts to hear Anakin's voice and starts coming to this realization slowly, but is in complete denial about it. How is it possible that he's Darth Vader? There's no way, which culminates in that confrontation that, again, illegal cliffhanger, you think Ahsoka dies. So there's a lot of really good characterization of her, and especially because, again, like I was saying before, she never overtakes the main story, and you can see her grow from her interactions with our Ghost family and how she inspires them as well, because she was a full-fledged Jedi. I mean, Kanan was only a Padawan when Order 66 happened, so he didn't get to get his full training either, and he was kind of in denial of that side of himself. Ezra obviously doesn't know that he has any Jedi powers until he joins the Ghost. So to actually be able to interact with somebody that had been, she was still a Padawan, but she'd gotten most of her training, and she'd gotten her training by one of the strongest Jedi that had ever existed. And to have been disillusioned by the Order when they turned their back on her, and then her thinking that she lost her master and everybody. So it's a very weird perspective to get from, you know, interacting with Ahsoka and her interacting with them. So I thought it was really well done. So, you know, and again, illegal cliffhanger. We get Ahsoka the White at the end. It's like we have to get Ezra, and bye. We don't know. So hopefully we'll get more of that, because I really fell in love with the character of Ezra. I really love Sabine as well.
Mhm.
Kanan, obviously, but we lost Kanan forever.
No one's ever really gone.
Yeah, Hera was fantastic. I think, Goose, you hate Chopper, but I love Chopper.
I
Chopper,
hate
I
Chopper
love
with
Chopper.
a passion. He
Chopper's
is
like
my
an
least
asshole,
favorite
and he's
droid.
great.
I
Yeah.
absolutely hate. He's like my least.
I love Chopper.
I mean, okay, I don't hate.
Mhm.
I hate. I hate racists. I hate misogynists. I don't hate Chopper. I just strongly dislike him as a droid character in Star Wars. He's
Why?
safe in my hate meter, I guess. But
Do
he's
you love
still
Chopper too,
bottom
Mo?
of the barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chopper's
Yeah.
great.
Like I have all the black series of all the ghosts except Chopper. I mean, it's like,
Oh,
nope,
no.
he's not part of my collection.
You're gonna regret that in 50 years when you try to sell the collection, and you'll be like, oh, you
Nope,
don't get
I'll
the
be
full
proud. I'll
price
be like,
because
nope.
you don't have Chopper.
Exactly. I'll lose that money gladly.
Well, there's something really cool about Chopper, because Chopper clearly has PTSD.
He murders
So-
people left and right, so I respect that.
No,
He has a high body count.
He has a high body, and then, but it's a very old droid, like
yeah,
there's like a first generation
that's been through a lot.
that's
Yeah.
been through a
Yeah,
lot.
okay.
Like,
I'm surprised we haven't seen like his type of droid in the
Like-
High Republic. Because that would be like a cool thing. Like he's that old. He's from the High Republic. So
true, like we get the old cranky version of a robot.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's like the cranky grandpa.
Yeah.
On
It's
the,
like, I'm all over. I'm done with your crap. I'm just going
I'm
to
done
do
with your
whatever I wanna
crap,
do.
like-
Yep.
like
I know.
I don't like you. I'm gonna punch you.
Like hitting people with a cane.
Get off of my lawn.
Yep.
You damn
Yes.
kids and your
Yes.
Nintendo.
Exactly.
That's what Chopper is. You gotta love Chopper.
So with that, I mean, because I want to like flip this into like a positive note. Would that be your favorite character? Nani, Mo, is Chopper your favorite character?
No, I love
Yeah.
Chopper, but I don't. Chopper's not my.
Chopper has the honorable mention.
Honorable
Mhm.
mention. Okay. So he's on the bottom of everyone's list, is what we're saying.
No,
No, not really.
at the bottom. It's like
So
So-
you're saying you dislike Seb more
No.
than Chopper?
No.
I'm saying Chopper is like
Of the
You
Ghost
know.
crew, I mean, of the Ghost
Of-
crew,
yeah.
not the whole
Mhm.
character.
it's
not
it's
the
like
Star
it's
Wars
like
canon.
it's like Chopper is unclassified. You can't rank Chopper.
He's in a class all of himself. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just
That's a cop out, but I accept it. I like how you guys. Hey, we all went to similar schools. I know these strategies. And you guys went to law school. I don't have to go to law school to know
The evasion.
what you guys are doing. Yeah. Objection, Your Honor. Objection. Sustained. Whatever those things mean. But okay, so let's talk about favorite characters. Who would you say is like your favorite character, your tippy top of Star Wars Rebels? Let's go, Nani first.
I totally have a crush on Kanan. I just do.
Why?
Because he's
because
awesome.
it's Freddie Prinze Jr.
Puerto Ricans in the house.
Exactly.
But no, I actually have a huge crush on him. And then there's a lot of growth in that character, especially after he goes
Yeah.
blind and everything, and trying to, because there's this denial and acceptance of who he is through interacting with his family, and then this need to like be in control all the time, and then trying to learn to let go of some of that control. But I think my favorite character really is Sabine. There's so
Mhm.
much that happens with Sabine, like everything that happened with her family in Mandalore, how she feels like she betrayed them, everything that she did with the Empire, then leaving the Empire. And at the beginning, you don't know any of the story. She's just like this badass who loves graffiti and is super artistic, strong and powerful. But then you really, when you hear everything that happened to her in the past, and then when she becomes the de facto leader because she ends up with the Darksaber and she doesn't know what to do
Mhm.
with it, the whole sequence with Kanan trying to teach her how to use it, and then her interaction with Bo-Katan and going back to Mandalore and having to face her family and all the guilt, the fact that she was exiled. There's a lot going on with this character. So I'm always, I mean, Hera's obviously a very strong female character as well, but I love all strong female characters. And Sabine came out of left field. I didn't know that this character existed until I watched Rebels, and I really, really liked her.
It's interesting when you say the story about Sabine, because I was on the Twitters, as I usually am. One of our podcasting friends, the Galactic Podcast, if you don't follow them, you should. They put up a video the other day of the first scene of Rebels and one of the last scenes of Rebels, and it was mind-blowing, because the first scene of Rebels, if you guys remember, is basically Ezra up in his tower overlooking Lothal, and like it's all Imperial and the Star Destroyers are coming down. And one of the final scenes of Rebels is shot for shot that exact same scene, but with Sabine, with the like reconstituted Lothal. So it's like her with the towers like gleaming now, and she's like up there in the same pose as Ezra was, like looking at Lothal. Now Lothal's beautiful and gleaming in the sun instead of Star Destroyers, like, you know, multiple beautiful ships coming down. But it's I just got shivers actually thinking about it, because it's like shot for shot exactly the same, and it's like so awesome and poignant in terms of both characters' stories, to what led them want to leave that point and want to return to that point. It's just like, good job, Dave Filoni. You're doing a good fucking job.
I never noticed that, but
character?
it sounds amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Mo, who's your favorite character?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint like who's a favorite. But if I had to pick one, I think I've always been partial for Hera. I love the character design. The whole like you know,
kind of mechanics jumpsuit.
Pilot jumpsuit, like it's just so. And then
the first one that flies the B wings.
You know why Chopper is not a, you know what, Chopper is not a distinct category. Chopper is just like Hera's like pet, like grandpa, like they're like a combo. Like
that's good. It's like in the Golden Compass. He's her demon.
Exactly.
He's her demon, basically. Okay.
I like that. I like that a lot.
I like that.
So, So I'll add that as a bonus. You know, it's just like, but I love like her character development. Might not seem like as extreme as others. It's more like internal. You know, from you know, like, oh, I'm being, you know, just because I'm the captain of, or like the owner of the ship, like, does that make me the leader? And like how her whole evolution is about like embracing like the role of, you know, being comfortable in her own jumpsuit. And like I think that's a story, like, you know, she doesn't have weird wizardy powers. She doesn't have like, well, although I think she might be somehow like connected, like when she's flying or like piloting. And I hope they like Star Wars goes deeper into that. Like people, like normal people might connect into the Force when they're doing like, you know, like they're doing what they're very
doing stuff
into,
what they excel at.
If it's like,
and I agree with you, Mo. I feel like all really excellent fighter pilots have to have some sort of connection to the Force, because there's it's so fast how they're reacting to everything that there has to be something. So I really hope they would explore that at some point.
And you know, and how at the end, you know, she ends up being a mother, and like that whole like evolution of like, you know, unfortunately Kanan gets killed, and can't somehow, it's like a Nexus event
that still hurts.
Taking it from
they can't
reverse it.
Good job bringing in the Marvel terms here, the Nexus event. Unfortunately, he is not a Nexus being, so he cannot do anything about it. Good job. What if? Here we go.
What if? I mean, that would be an interesting what if. What if Kanan? I mean, we know what will happen. You'll create.
Everyone would die.
No, we don't know what will happen, because then, if someone is on the wormhole thingy, and that makes a second wormhole, does that wormhole eat the other wormhole? Like,
Oh God. Stop.
Too much. Actually, that'll be a conversation for when we talk about the world between worlds. Because if there is something that this conversation has definitely made me hyper aware of, is before I was like, okay, we're gonna need a couple of like in-depth Rebels episodes to discuss some of the either story arcs or moments that happen in the show, like definitely the world between worlds. But there's so much more that everyone just keeps bringing up that just highlights the wealth and the plethora of possibilities that this show has gifted us with. But before we start wrapping things up, though, I have to.
what's your favorite?
Yeah, what's yours? Not Thrawn, of the members of
It's
the
not
Thrawn.
It's not Thrawn. It's not Thrawn. No, because the problem with not problem. That's a poor choice of words. But it's the issue with even having Thrawn in the running, which he's not in the show, is because his characterization in the show is not the same as the books, because they're not giving him that depth that the books do, because he's not the main character and he's the antagonist of the show, and understandably so. So that's, for me, is why he's not my favorite character, because he doesn't have that depth that I'm used to now, especially with the Thrawn Ascendancy books, which if anyone hasn't read them, please read them. The only book review videos that we've had so far out are about the Thrawn Ascendancy books, so please make sure to check them out. They're amazing. But favorite character is interesting because it's definitely not Chopper, like we discussed already. It's not Seb, unfortunately. It's not Seb, because even though I really appreciate Seb and what he is for the show, right? Because it's like he's the only alien in the ship, and his whole race has been slaughtered, so he's one of the last of his kind.
No, so's Hera.
But there's a lot of Twi'leks around, right?
Mhm.
So like Seb is very unique in that sense, and he has a interspecies romance with Callus, and no one's gonna change my mind otherwise. They're an
I agree with that completely. Yep.
Especially
they're
sexy,
definitely-
especially sexy Callus with the hair flowing down. I didn't make that term. That was
they definitely made out on that ice planet. That's for sure.
Our friends over at Pink Milk would definitely agree that sexy Callus and Seb have something going on.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I do think that Ezra's like the character that I like the most, even though he's the character that I disliked the most when the show started, because I thought he was just a whiny kid, clumsy, just trying. And that's kind of part of the course, right? With Star Wars male characters, like Anakin's a whiny little bitch in Attack of the Clones.
So is
Luke is kind of like a whiny little kid, also like in the movies. So Ben Solo, a little whiny, and then Force Awakens. Okay, not very, a little, very whiny.
A lot.
So it's part of the course for male Star Wars characters. But the more the show progressed, I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot to this character that's really developing him further and giving him a lot more depth than I would have ever expected, especially with all the trials and tribulations, right, that he has to go through. Because not only does he start from, I want to break away from this place because I want to have a bigger world. It's like, no, because I want to search for my parents. And my parents, were taken by the Empire, and I need to find them because I need to rescue them, because screw the Empire and also my parents. But then his parents are dead,
murdered,
and like his reckoning that he has to like take up with himself, with like, okay, what do I do? What's next for me? Like, how do I deal with this? It's it's a lot of it's heavy stuff, especially for a show that's again geared for a younger audience, to just be like, hey, your parents that you thought were alive, that there was hope that we can find them, and we put breadcrumbs that you're gonna find them. Nope, they're actually dead. It's soul crushing for a character and for like an audience for us to see that. And like his journey is just like incredible in that sense, because then he almost loses his master. He kind of almost loses his master again when he's blinded. His master's not giving him the things that he needs to like grow as a student. And then boom, Darth Maul comes in. It's like, oh, the dark side, angel, and the angel and the devil on your shoulder trying to show you the correct path. And the path is maybe not the right one, but it's the one you need to follow right now because it's, it's the thing that your soul needs and the consequences of all that. So I don't know. Ezra is very powerful, especially with how the story ends, because not ends, how it culminates in this part of the story.
In Rebels.
Obviously continues, but the one-to-one mirror, right, of him holding back the space, not the space whales, but whatever the hell he's holding back before the space whales come and take them away, the same way that Kanan was doing that to save the ghost crew. And that parallel, like the apprentice becomes the master and all that stuff. It's amazing.
Oh my God, goosebumps again.
Yeah, it's
there's
amazing.
So many good things in this show.
But especially with his commanding of the Force in a more naturalistic type of sense, because so far we've always seen the Force be used. In Clone Wars we've seen people commune with animals, but the fact that Ezra is so in tune with nature and animals and is able to not use them or control them, but commune with them, to be able to kind of see them as a part of the Force, right? Just like everything else is.
And to learn from them as well. With every being that is like sensitive to the Force, he learns new aspects of the Force that I feel like Jedi have ignored with all their indoctrination. And this like opens up the galaxy to so much more.
Yeah, it's speciesist, right? And Ezra kind of transcends that a little bit. So probably Ezra's vegan. But that's just, a shot in the dark.
Super vegan. Super vegan powers.
Super vegan powers. Because, who else can commandeer space whales that can travel through hyperspace to come and take you and my boy in blue away to who knows what part of the galaxy. So I think that was long-winded, but you guys asked me for it. So I think Ezra is the big boy in this one. I think number 2 is tied.
Hashtag bring Ezra back.
Hashtag where's Ezra?
Yeah.
And it would be, I think number 2 would be a tie between Sabine and Kanan. But that's it. I think we can go like we can go for hours and hours discussing Rebels, and we will, just not in this episode. This episode is just a little, it's just a little taste. It's a little taste of what's to come once Rebels Remembered starts, which is this March the 5th. It's Rebels Remembered Day. So this is like our it's the pregame. This is the pregame to Rebels Remembered.
So we can focus on some of our fantastic favorite arcs, we can do an entire episode just about the Force sensitive animals that we see around the world. So just one episode on that.
Maybe we should. Oh, we're gonna get
we
crazy.
Probably should. But I think we should be wrapping up, right? Any last thoughts before we're done?
Well, how did you feel about the whole Force connection with animals? Because I know you're very sensitive to like how sometimes animals are portrayed in Star Wars, and mostly they just kill them off when they're like a threat. I know that that doesn't resonate with you. So how did Rebels make you feel about that before we wrap up?
I think it's beautiful. It's part of the whole tenet of like, the Force, everything is in the Force, and to like deny all of that aspect, and like what Nanny said, like, and you were hinting at Goose, like every time Ezra will commune with, even though at the end of the day, you don't understand how it works, because I don't think any of them understood how this space whales were able to use the Force, or how the wolves were able to, Lothal wolves were able to teleport or change into the Force. But being able to recognize and respect it, I think that's a lot we have to learn. And even within ourselves, like, recognize and respect other human beings. You don't have to understand them, you just have to recognize and respect them, and you just learn from that, just being okay with, like, and I think that's very, very special, especially knowing that it's a children's show, that at the end of the day, those are the messages that stick around, because they're And alongside with that is the respect that they showed to droids also in Rebels, starting with like how giving them that whole empathy and emotional aspect, that they're just more than just scrap metal, that they're actually be like conscious beings. And so any show that ventures that, I'm all for it. So
I mean, that's a perfect way to kind of end cap this Rebels conversation with I mean, not to break this down again, but to kind of like remind everyone about the Amidala Initiative. You don't have to you don't have to understand someone to be able to respect them, even though you should always strive to understand them. And Rebels definitely has taught us to do that: respect, accept, and become one big family. And with that, I just want to remind everyone of the Amidala Initiative, or Equality for Texas, a nonprofit that we're participating in to do a GoFundMe and raise funds so that we can protect trans youths in Texas after basically the trans ban that the governor over there did. So just to remind everyone, links is in the description below. But it's all love. Trans rights are human rights. Trans lives matter, and love is love.
Love is love. Always. Well, I think with that, we are done. Rebels Remembers Day is coming up. So we are doing an overview here of how much we love this show. We will eventually focus on some definitive arcs and stuff that we love about it. So stay tuned for that. Remember to check out the Amidala Initiative. We're going to leave links and everything for that too. And until next time, we are Triad of the Force. You can find us wherever podcasts can be found. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere. Just search Triad of the Force and you will find us. So until next time, may the Force be with you.